The anniversary of Japan's huge earthquake and tsunami is this weekend. Today, 1 year after the disaster, new documents were released that may add salt to the country's lingering wounds. The report says Japan's leaders knew just 4 hours after the tsunami that the damaged Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant could melt down. But they kept the information secret for months. According to some government ministers, nobody seemed to be in charge as the crisis unfolded. Meanwhile, a year on, the search for victims continues. Today, policemen from across the region were looking for any hints of the missing from this hard-hit town. In all, more than 15,800 people died when the earthquake and tsunami hit. Another 3,300 are still missing. So how is Japan doing rebuilding some of those towns and villages leveled by the tsunami? Last March, our Chris Brown reported from the disaster zone, so we asked him to check in on the reconstruction efforts.
1 year has passed, but the images of what the Japanese call the Great Tohoku earthquake still feel as fresh as they are shocking. Incredible shaking.
Live footage of Miyagi as the tsunami has struck the area.
Followed by enormous waves, and then a crippled nuclear plant spewing deadly radiation. Even for the disaster-hardened Japanese, their ability to cope was overwhelmed. Joji Kumagai led the relief efforts for the Japanese community in BC. He's a volunteer with the local community association, and he's intently followed what's happened in Japan since. So has Kazue Matsumoto. She now calls Vancouver home, but she grew up near the stricken nuclear plant and has just returned from her first trip to the destruction zone.
In my hometown or like coastal area, like there's still nothing, no new building. I saw this open wide area and then nothing new yet.
Where there were once communities, there are now empty streets and concrete slabs. Huge piles of debris are everywhere, says Matsumoto, and it may take more than 2 years just to finish the cleanup. In the days after the disaster, our CBC crew visited the devastated fishing village of Noda. This is the heart of Japan's tsunami zone, and even before the tsunami hit, it was already suffering economically with a high proportion of seniors. Even in those early days, the question was, should such a place be rebuilt, and if so, maybe further from the sea? Matsumoto says Japan is divided on the answer.
We have limited resources. It's such a huge area affected, so we have to use the money quite efficiently. So those depopulated area, we have to think how much we can spend money on it.
Kumagai believes it would be disrespectful to simply abandon places that were lost.
It's tough. I mean, geographically, it's a very powerful connection to who you are as a person. And the community that you've grown up in, and I think it'd be very difficult to make that very rational decision based on the fact that there's so much more at play.
More than 300,000 people are still living in temporary shelters, and Matsumoto says she heard heartbreaking stories of depression and mental illness stalking the survivors.
My friend's uncle, he was doing some fishery-related thing. His company was, just wiped away by tsunami. His bosses, everybody was just died. And then he realizing it, he was like, okay, then I'm gonna start the company again. And he was working so hard for 6 months or something. But then, that happened and he just got a depression and now he cannot do it.
They have words like gaman and gambatte and stuff like that in Japan. It's just like, just get through it kind of thing, like persevere and you'll get through things. And I think that sort of lends itself to a country where, you're not as open to discussing your challenges or struggles or those kinds of things.
The crippled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant continues to be a source of danger and anger. Radiation levels in nearby towns are measured daily. And there's a lot of confusion about whether the local food is safe to eat. Japanese government data on the amount of radiation released is contradictory, and Kumagai says many Japanese don't know what to believe.
I know people are quite sensitive to using that. I know some young families in the area, they just say they won't touch any of that. So again, it's something that will take a very long time to sort of overcome.
The work is not done in Vancouver either. Volunteers are organizing a one-year anniversary concert, and among the performers will be Kozue Matsumoto. She says they decided to give any money they raised to Japan's mental health agencies because 1 year after, the scars on the people run far deeper than on the land. Chris Brown, CBC News, Vancouver.
Japan's disaster had repercussions around the world. Several European countries moved away from nuclear power. Even China put its nuclear program on hold for a while. But now Beijing has resumed construction of new reactors. That doesn't sit well with some. The CBC's Catherine Mercier is in China.
On a dreary, wet day in Qinshan on China's eastern coast, a villager encourages us to follow him to his home. He says he has something to show us. Look, he tells us, it's so close. It is the Qinshan nuclear power plant. The facility has loomed over the village for the past 20 years, just a few meters away from Wang Zhiming's home, where he ekes out a living growing vegetables. Bit by bit, the plant has expanded, encroaching on his property. They came here and built the plant. They didn't relocate us, and they don't care if we go hungry or we die. He has kidney disease, and his wife has cancer. A doctor told them it was likely caused by radiation from the power plant, they say, but they can't prove it. On their street, almost every household has someone with cancer. The village doctor says before the nuclear facility opened, he had very few cancer patients. Now he has 18. This nuclear power plant is all around us, this side, that side. We are besieged.
China is now the second largest consumer of energy in the world, and as it moves away from coal and other fossil fuels, the government has set its sight on an ambitious nuclear energy program.
China has 14 nuclear reactors, but 26 are currently under construction, and another 51 are planned. Just a little over 1% of the country's energy is from nuclear power, but by 2020, it's expected to increase to 5%. Critics advocate a more measured approach to expansion, but this energy analyst says it's necessary to help wean the country off its dependence on coal. China is the biggest CO2 emitter. If it continues like that, by 2020 we will surpass the total emissions of the US, the EU, India and Japan. It's impossible to continue like that. Back in Qinshan, villagers have spotted us and seek us out, anxious to tell their stories. We have no choice. We can't afford to move. We will die here, says this woman. A price these villagers say is just too high to pay for their country's rapid development. Catherine Mercier, CBC News, Zhejiang Province in China.